Okay, so you're here because you want to really get to the heart of it, right? You want to understand something quickly and deeply. And today we're going to dive deep into Shakespeare.
Into Richard II.
Yes, Richard II, specifically Act 3, which is such a crucial moment in English history.
Yeah, it really is at that pivotal moment where the whole balance of power shifts. And we're going to try to break that down for you.
Yeah, we're going to give you a fast track to understanding just what's going on in this act. And we have some really fascinating material to work with, don't we?
We do. We have some really insightful analyses from study guides, some really detailed scene breakdowns, and, of course, the words of Shakespeare himself.
And it's all focused on Act 3, right?
Exactly. All focused on this act, yeah.
So our mission today is to really synthesize all of that, take these different sources, and pull out the main story.
Right, the narrative.
Yeah, and the characters and what drives them, what are their motivations?
Their motivations, and then those big timeless themes that Shakespeare was exploring. Those ideas that still resonate with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you walk away with a really clear understanding of this really critical moment in the play.
Yeah.
Okay, so Act 3 opens in Bristol. And right away, Bolingbroke is making quite an entrance. I mean, he's not just arriving. He's arriving with Bushy and Green as his prisoners.
Yeah, you can tell right from the start that he's making a statement, isn't he? It's a show of force, a display of authority.
Absolutely, and he doesn't waste any time. He immediately lays out his grievances against Bushy and Green. He doesn't hold back.
And what's really interesting is how specific he is in his accusations. I mean, he's not just saying, oh, you're bad advisors or something vague.
Got receipts, right?
He's got receipts. Yeah. He's like, okay, you misled the king.
You created this tension.
You created tension between the king and queen, which is a huge deal because it undermines the stability of the whole, monarchy.
Exactly. And then, of course, he doesn't forget to mention how they personally benefited from his banishment.
Right, how they seized his lands and titles.
It's like, that's personal, right?
That's totally personal.
It's not just a vague complaint. He's really building a case here.
He is.
And the consequences are immediate, Bushy and Green. They're executed right there and then.
Yeah, it's really brutal, really stark. And it just shows you the power that Bolingbroke now has.
Right, it's a message, isn't it?
It is. It's a message to anyone who might be thinking of opposing him.
Like, don't mess with me.
Yeah, exactly. And even in those final moments before their execution, we see these really contrasting reactions from Bushy and Green.
That's true. One's defiant, the other.
Bushy's defiant. He's basically like, anything is better than you ruling England.
Yeah.
And then Green is seeking comfort in this idea of divine justice.
Right, karma.
Yeah, like God will take care of this in the end. It's a small detail, but it really tells you a lot about their characters and how they face death.
And this public execution, it was a calculated move, wasn't it? It wasn't just about getting revenge.
Well, definitely. It was about establishing his authority, establishing legitimacy, in the eyes of potential supporters.
He's trying to win people over.
He is.
Yeah.
And by publicly listing all these wrongs that were committed against the realm, he's presenting himself as this restorer of justice.
So smart.
It's very clever.
And then there's this interesting moment where it's about the queen, how she's doing. And he sends his kind commends. He wants her treated well.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of unexpected, isn't it? Amidst all this, bloodshed and maneuvering.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what his motivations are there, right?
Exactly. Is it genuine concern or is it just another strategic move,
Right, because he doesn't want to alienate any potential allies.
Right. He needs to keep the queen on side.
And then just that he's off again to confront Glendower.
It's like bam, 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 so decisive.
Yeah, the first scene is like a whirlwind.
It really is.
And then in scene 2, we're transported to this completely different setting. We're on the coast of Wales, and King Richard has just returned.
Yeah, and despite everything that's going on back in England, his initial reaction is almost joyful, isn't it?
Yeah, he's greeting the land as if nothing's wrong.
Yeah, and he talks about England in this really personal way. He personifies the land.
It's like he thinks the earth itself will rise up to defend him.
Right. He's pleading with the land not to favor his enemies, even imagining spiders and toads as his allies.
It's almost like he's in denial.
Yeah, it really shows how detached he is from the reality of the situation.
And of course, we can't forget that unshakable belief in the divine right of kings.
Yeah.
That's so central to Richard's character.
Yeah, that idea that his authority comes directly from God.
And he says that famous line, right?
Yeah. Not all the water in the rough-rowed sea can wash the balm off from an anointed king.
Wow. Yeah, it's like he truly believes that his God-given status will protect him.
That line is really key to understanding Richard, isn't it? He sees his kingship as something sacred, something untouchable.
Right, and our sources point out that this belief in divine right is like fundamental to his identity. It's how he understands his own authority.
Yeah, so it's like even though the world is throwing all these challenges at him, he clings to this idea of divine power.
But it's interesting because it makes you think, right? Like, does the idea of divine power actually translate into real authority?
Yeah, good point.
You know, when things get tough, does it actually hold up?
Oh, we're about to find out.
Because the reality check is coming hard and fast, isn't it? The Earl of Salisbury arrives, and he brings some truly devastating news.
Yeah, Salisbury's arrival is a major turning point in the play.
It's like the hope just drains away.
It does, and what he reveals is that the Welsh forces, the very support that Richard was counting on, they've scattered, they think he's dead.
Oh no.
And not only that, they've aligned themselves with Bolingbroke.
So it's like the rug has been pulled out from under him?
Yeah, exactly. And it shows just how quickly Richard's support is eroding and how out of touch he is with what's actually happening.
And Salisbury's line about their arrival being one day too late, it's just so poignant, you know?
It's heartbreaking.
But the bad news doesn't stop there.
No, it doesn't.
Uh-huh.
So Stephen's group arrives with even more calamitous tidings.
It's like wave after wave of despair crashing over Richard.
I know, and Scroop paints this really vivid picture of rebellion spreading like wildfire across the country.
Young and old, everyone supporting Bolingbroke.
Everyone, even members of the clergy, and he confirms that Wiltshire, Bushy, and Green have been executed at Bristol.
Oh, wow. So it's like Bolingbroke is consolidating his power with every move.
He is, and he's sending a very clear message to any of Richard's remaining supporters.
Like, this is what happens if you stay loyal to the king.
Exactly, and the scale of the uprising that Scroop describes is just, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's huge. And this is a moment where we see Richard just completely fall apart. You know, his initial optimism vanishes.
Yeah, it evaporates, and he becomes fixated on images of death and decay,
Yeah.
you know, graves, worms, epitaphs.
It's like he's having this total psychological breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, faced with the loss of his allies, the crumbling of his support, his belief in divine protection starts to waver.
You know, it's interesting because he even starts questioning his own identity and the nature of kingship.
Right, he has that powerful line about the hollow crown where death his court keeps. It's like he's suddenly realizing his own mortality.
And it makes you think, right, about how the symbols of power, those outward trappings,
Yeah, the crown, the robes.
they don't mean anything without the ability to actually govern, to actually lead.
Right. It's like Shakespeare saying that true power comes from something deeper than just wearing a fancy hat.
It's a timeless message, isn't it?
It really is.
And amid all this despair, the Bishop of Carlisle steps in. You know, he tries to rally Richard to get him to take action.
Yeah, he's like the voice of reason in all this chaos.
Yeah, and Aumerle suggests reaching out to the Duke of York.
It's like they're grasping at straws, aren't they, trying to find any remaining source of support?
But then Scroop delivers the final blow.
The news about York.
York, Richard's own uncle, the man he appointed as Lord Governor, he's joined Bolingbroke.
Yeah, and the northern castles have surrendered. The southern gentlemen are flocking to Bolingbroke's banner. It's like a total collapse of Richard's authority.
This is the moment that truly breaks Richard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's devastating. I mean, York was his representative. His betrayal signifies that the established order has completely crumbled.
And Richard just gives up. He decides to retreat to Flint Castle and just waste away.
He dismisses his followers. He's like, what's the point of any more advice?
Yeah, it's a scene of utter resignation.
It is. And, you know, York's betrayal really highlights this theme of shifting loyalties that runs throughout the play.
Right, it's not just about personal grudges. It's about this broader instability in the kingdom and how Richard's perceived weakness is attracting these betrayals.
Exactly. He's seen as a weak king, and people are jumping ship.
So in scene 3, we're outside Flint Castle, and Bolingbroke arrives looking very much in control.
Yeah, he's totally in command. And he even knows that the Welsh forces have disbanded and that Salisbury is on his way to Richard.
He's got his intel.
He does. He's well informed, and he's positioning himself strategically for the final showdown.
And there's that interesting moment where the Duke of York rebukes Northumberland for not addressing Richard as King Richard.
Right. It's like a reminder that even among Bolingbroke's supporters, there's still some respect for the title. Or maybe it's just York grappling with his own mixed feelings.
Yeah, he's in a tough spot, isn't he?
He is.
And then Percy reports on who's inside Flint Castle.
Yeah, Richard Aumerle, Salisbury Scroop, and the Bishop of Carlisle.
It's like a tiny little group holding out against this massive force.
Yeah, the contrast is really stark.
And then we have Bolingbroke's message delivered by Northumberland, via trumpet.
Yeah, it sounds almost reasonable at first.
Yeah, like he's offering to repeal Bolingbroke's banishment, restore his lands.
But it's all conditional, right?
Oh, yeah, there's a very clear threat there. Do this or else.
Or else it's war.
And Richard appears on the walls of the castle trying to project some kind of royal authority.
Yeah, he's trying to hold on to that last shred of dignity.
Yeah, he questions Northumberland's lack of respect, reminds everyone of his divine right.
But you can hear the desperation in his voice.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to convince himself as much as anyone else.
And Northumberland very smoothly relays Bolingbroke's demands.
Emphasizing his lineal royalties, his right to inherit.
Yeah, it's very clever the way he frames it. He's not challenging the king directly. He's just claiming what he believes is rightfully his.
And that would have resonated with a lot of people back then, right? This idea of lineage and inheritance.
Yeah, definitely. It makes Bolingbroke seem like the legitimate heir.
And then we see Richard really struggling with this,
Yeah, he's torn between his belief in divine right and the reality of Bolingbroke's power.
He knows he's losing, but he can't let go of that idea that he's chosen by God.
It's a powerful internal conflict.
But eventually he gives in, he resigns himself to Bolingbroke's demands.
And he even laments his own decision to banish Bolingbroke all those years ago.
It's like he's realizing the consequences of his past actions.
Yeah, and he talks about exchanging his royal symbols for the clothes of a common man and wanting a humble grave.
It's really sad, he's totally defeated.
He is.
And then Northumberland asks Richard to come down to the base court.
Yeah, that phrase is loaded with meaning.
What does it represent?
It's a symbolic demotion.
Yeah.
Richard is being forced to descend, literally and figuratively.
And Richard's response is so full of irony, right? Base court where kings grow base.
Yeah, it's like he's acknowledging his own fall from grace.
And the meeting in the base court is so powerful, Bolingbroke kneels, but Richard sees right through it.
Yeah, he can tell it's all an act.
He's still got that sharp mind, even though he's lost everything.
Yeah, he recognizes that Bolingbroke's outward show of respect doesn't match his true ambition.
And when Bolingbroke says, "I come but for my own," it's such an understatement.
It is. It's like, yeah, you're taking the whole kingdom, buddy.
And Richard just completely submits, "Your own is yours, and I am yours and all."
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. And then Bolingbroke suggests they go to London, and Richard just goes along with it. He's got no fight left.
The journey to London represents the transfer of power.
Yeah.
Richard is essentially a prisoner now.
Yeah, the game is over.
Yeah.
And then our final scene in Act 3 takes us to Langley, to the Duke of York's garden, where the Queen is just consumed by grief.
Yeah, she's trying to distract herself, but nothing seems to work.
Yeah, she can't escape the worry and the fear.
It really highlights her anxiety about Richard's fate and the future of the kingdom.
And then the gardener enters with his servants, and they have this conversation that the Queen overhears.
And it's fascinating because we get this perspective from someone outside the world of the nobility,
Yeah, the common man's view of all this upheaval.
And the gardener uses this really interesting allegory. He compares the kingdom to a garden that's been neglected.
Yeah, and Richard's mismanagement is like the gardener who's let everything go to seed.
And the weeds are bushy green and Wiltshire, those advisors who've been plucked up by Bolingbroke.
And he sees this as a necessary act of pruning, to restore order.
Yeah, and all the specific gardening tasks he talks about, they're metaphors for the political events that are happening.
Like binding apricots is like controlling the nobles.
Right, and cutting back overgrown branches is like removing those who've become too powerful.
And rooting out weeds is getting rid of the corrupt influences.
Exactly, and this scene is so powerful because it shows how the impact of these political decisions goes beyond the court.
It affects everyone, even the gardeners.
Yeah, and the gardener's practical viewpoint contrasts so much with the Queen's aristocratic perspective.
It's like it raises the question of where true power really lies.
Yeah, is it in divine right? Or is it in the ability to maintain order and the support of the people?
And the gardener is very blunt about Richard's capture. He's heard from his sources that the king will likely be deposed.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it, and it reflects this growing sentiment against Richard.
Like people are ready for a change.
Yeah, they're fed up with his rule.
And the Queen is just outraged by this, She can't believe that a commoner would speak about the king this way.
She's furious. And it shows her loyalty to Richard, but also her shock at hearing these pronouncements from someone of the gardener's social standing.
Yeah, she can't comprehend it.
But the gardener stands his ground.
Yeah.
He explains that Richard is in Bolingbroke's power.
Yeah.
and that public opinion is turned against the king.
He's basically saying the king has lost the support of the people.
Yeah, and that's a really powerful idea.
And the queen's lament at being the last to know, it's so sad.
Yeah, it is. And then she leaves for London to witness Bolingbroke's triumph, and she even curses the gardener's plants in her despair.
Yeah, it's like she's directing her anger at anything she can.
And the gardener's final action, planting rue in remembrance of her sorrow, it adds this really poignant touch,
Yeah, rue is that symbol of sorrow and repentance.
a fitting symbol for the queen's situation.
So as Act 3 ends, we've seen this huge shift. Richard's support has completely vanished. He's gone from hopeful to utterly defeated, and Bolingbroke is rising to power.
Yeah, it's been a dramatic act.
And we've seen these two very different approaches to power. Richard clinging to that divine, right?
Which ultimately proves ineffective.
And then Bolingbroke being very pragmatic, using force and strategy.
Yeah, he's much more ruthless and calculating.
And the themes of loyalty and betrayal are so central to this act, aren't they?
Yeah, the speed at which Richard is abandoned by those he thought were loyal, it's shocking.
And the language and the ceremony in this act, they really emphasize the shifting dynamics of power.
Yeah, Richard relying on the power of his title, and Bolingbroke manipulating those symbolic gestures like kneeling.
It's all about image and perception.
It is.
So as you reflect on Act 3, thinking about Richard's unwavering belief in divine right and his ultimate submission, what does this tell us about power and authority?
Yeah, what's the real source of power?
Is it divine sanction, or is it something else entirely,
Something more earthly.
Yeah, something more tangible, and in this historical moment, which force ultimately held sway? That's something to think about.
Definitely something to ponder.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.